What I'm about to tell you about what I experienced, I am still involved in it. I just can't really see any way to just leave without suffering consequences. I know that I'm a coward and would rather take easy money rather than risk my own well-being, but I hope that this post can at least serve as some kind of middle ground. I will start by saying that I've worked as a security guard for many years. Mostly though, I have worked close protection, so as a personal bodyguard essentially. I've worked for some pretty wealthy people over the years, some very public, and others who aren't seen very often, or that people plain just do not know, yet still possess insane amounts of wealth. There's a lot of people like that. I've worked for this one guy for the better part of the decade. I accompanied him to public events as part of a team, coordinated security for private parties and meetings and the like. You name it, and I have done it. I can't name any names. I can't name my employer or any of the other people that I saw at this event. If I keep names hidden, there's a chance this flies under the radar and someone else takes the fall. If I tell you, it becomes immediately obvious who I am, and I don't want to think about what might happen to me. Up until this event, I had never had to take part in anything weird or that made me feel uncomfortable. I'd gotten into a few fights on the job and such, but I'd never done anything I would consider bad or morally wrong. All the events were mostly pretty normal. Okay, some of the people are weird and they do weird stuff, but nothing like illegal. But one day, I get told that my employer has a new job for me. He wanted me to accompany him personally to a private event that was being hosted. He said it was a rare occasion and that he had decided to trust me and bring me into the fold because of my long service, and that's what he said to me personally. I would be his personal bodyguard along with a few other people until we reached the event, and then I would do whatever he needed me to do. And that was basically the entire briefing. That's all I needed to know. I didn't really get told anything else about the event. It sounded okay to me, and of course I was making a lot of money. The building that I accompanied him to, it was strange, to say the least. Definitely not a usual locale, not a place I was familiar with or that I had accompanied him to before. For starters, we flew out to a different state. I won't say where, but let's just say it's a big city where a lot of rich people like to gather. We ended up arriving at some kind of nondescript compound. It was a big building, pretty hollow and freezing since it was all just concrete and not a lot was in there. It was like smack dab in the middle of the city in plain sight, but there was like no activity outside, no sign of security in the place either. There were a fair amount of people in the streets just walking around, but none of them seemed to take notice of the place. Like I said, when we entered the compound, there was nothing around at all, just bare concrete walls and floors. There wasn't even anything being stored in there. But that isn't where we stayed. There was an elevator and a door that led to a flight of stairs made out of concrete also. They were the only two things being guarded by anyone. There were only guards inside protecting these two entrances. The elevator was one of those freight ones, designed to move a lot of people or a lot of heavy items. When we got in there, I could have sworn it took around 5 non-stop minutes of just going down for the elevator to finally stop. I have no idea how far down we ended up. Maybe the elevator was just a little broken. Or maybe we really did just travel that far down. But once we got out of the elevator, the place was sprawling with activity. Basically all of the pathways coalesced into this gigantic room filled with people. Some of them were wearing those tacky masquerade masks that cover like half the face to conceal your identity. Some just were not wearing anything at all. I recognized some faces, but a lot were unknown to me because, like I said, there were a lot of people with money and power who you would not be able to pick out of a lineup. So many of them just stay under the radar. At the far end of the room, there was this stage-like thing. You know, one of those old ones with the rope strings and made of wood and stuff. It was set up like that, but it seemed like some of the workers were constructing something makeshift, It was already way in the process. It looked like it was almost done. They were erecting some kind of pillars with fencing, and I think there was barbed wire on it, which was interesting. It definitely caught my attention. There was a massive bar that wrapped around the place, and there were tables set up. There were waiters taking orders. People were eating. Everything just seemed so normal. What wasn't normal, though, were the cages that were hanging suspended above the stage. These cages were made of metal, and they were crammed and tightly packed together, kind of like a bird cage would be, but a little bit bigger. I have no idea what they were being suspended with, but it must have been something quite strong and quite heavy. And in them were people, I guess, but they were pale and malnourished. They looked like skin and bones, and like they had not had a sip of water in days. They were not even just suspended above the stage. They were suspended all around, near the walls too. These people must have been short to begin with, but they were just around like it was normal, like it was decoration. I know you'll probably ask why I did not kick up a fuss or leave or anything, but would you? Even only knowing the exact same amount as me at this point, would you risk your own life? One of the first rules that gets drilled into you when working for these kinds of people is only speak when spoken to. Do not question anything. Do not talk back. Do not ask, "Are you sure?" Your sole purpose is to say yes, and just to do whatever you are told. That's the only way you make it. Otherwise you never work in this sector ever again, and that is made sure of. I'm sure my mouth was agape, because my employer came over to talk to me. He'd found the table, and had been chatting with some other wealthy people for a while. I recognized one of them. I think he was a pretty famous businessman, but I don't remember entirely, because I was just so in shock at that moment. Like I said, up until this point, the weirdest thing I had seen was some weird fetish parties, but I only ever go to the outside. This was something else entirely. I asked my employer if he wanted me to help with any preparations, or if I could be of any use guarding the outside or anywhere else. That was dangerous of me. Like I said, only speak when spoken to, but honestly, I did not want to be in that room anymore, and I was trying to push my luck because of how long I worked for this guy. Luckily for me, he did not snap or get mad, but he told me no. He told me to stand next to him, beside the table, and his specific orders for me was to watch the stage and pay attention. He told me that he would have a job for me, but only after the first round is what he called it. I had no idea what he was talking about at that point. At this point, I was completely in the dark. I could not have guessed what was coming next in a million years. Some people were let out from behind the stage curtain at one point. They were similar to the people in cages, except they were not quite as malnourished. They had metal chains around their necks, like what people use to walk dogs. They were being walked using metal leads and were being forced to walk on all fours. If they tried to stand, they were struck and told to get back down. By now, all of the construction had been finished. The stage was surrounded by bits of barbed wire on these temporary metal fences. It was almost like a cage you would see in wrestling, but even more messed up. These people were walked to the front of the stage, I think 4 of them in total. Everyone in the room was laughing and shouting and applauding. I felt like I'd stepped into a parallel world. People were excited for this. One by one, these people in chains were walked forward and the audience would cheer. And if they cheered loud enough, then the door to the cage was opened and they were thrown inside after removing their blindfolds and collars. The cage was not massive, but there was enough room to keep your distance a little bit. Eventually, there were 2 men inside of there. The guards took the other 2 back behind the curtain, and this man in a suit stepped forward. I could be wrong, but I don't think he was rich. He did not seem it from the way he carried himself. He brought out a microphone and did some spiel that I don't really remember. He told people that they could place bets, that they could pay money to alter the game, which I'm not sure what he meant by that, and he did this introduction and tried to rile people up like it was a boxing match or something. He explained the rules. that the two men in the cage were going to fight, that the match would only end when one man could not fight anymore. He did not explain in any clearer terms than that. And then it started. It felt like it went on for hours when it started, but in reality, it was probably only a few minutes at most. I watched the men circle for a while, and they were hesitant. I was not too far away, so I could see the looks in their eyes. They both looked frightened to death, desperate, like they would do anything. After a minute of them doing nothing, the guy at the front made some kind of an announcement that someone had paid to make the game more exciting. I watched a man in one of those masquerade masks go down there, and from behind the curtain, they brought him some kind of a tool. I could not see at first what was happening with it, but when I saw him stick the thing through the metal cage and make contact with the skin of one of the fighters, I realized what it was. It was some kind of a metal cattle branding tool. He had just completely seared the back of one of the men, and he was using it to prod and push him towards the other man. He was laughing while doing this, and the crowd was clapping. The other fighter, well, he took advantage of the other man's pain. It wasn't long before he grabbed him and took him to the ground. He was on top of him and just beating him senseless again and again. At one point, I saw him start punching where his skin had been seared, and the man on the floor was just screaming. The man on top was sweating. He looked like he was going to pass out from exhaustion. It was at this point that one of the guards entered the cage and restrained the man on top, and then the announcement was made. Someone else had paid some money. Another man, this time not in a mask, but I had no idea who he was. He walked down to the stage. He actually entered the cage, helped the fighter up, and handed him some kind of a club. It was like one of those medieval mace things with spikes. He looked so pleased with himself. He actually stayed down there, cheering the guy on by the cage. That security guard, he did not even fucking leave. He kept the guy in a full Nelson as the other fighter smashed the skull of the other one in with this thing. After one blow, he went limp, and the guard dropped him to the floor. He was only semi-conscious by this point. He kept trying to raise his head, but kept failing, and it kept dropping back to the floor. The man with the weapon was looking all around, like he was pleading with his eyes, wondering what to do next. But he was told to keep on going, that as long as the other man was still breathing, the fight was not over. And so he took another swing. That was all that he needed. The other man's face was just a mass of blood. There was a dent in the man's head, I'm not even kidding. It was probably the worst sight I have ever seen in my entire life. After that, the fighter who won, if you could call it that, was restrained and tied up and dragged off backstage. Some workers and guards came out at one point and went into the cage. They tried their best to clean up what they could. I saw them putting chunks of something into a bucket. I wanted to throw up, but I had to hide it. I had to stifle it. I tried to distract myself, do that thing where you stare above something and let your vision go blurry so I couldn't actually see. But at one point, my heart drops because my employer tells me it's time to get to work. He tells me to follow him, and he takes me backstage, behind the curtain. He told me that he's been waiting for this event for quite a while and had paid good money for this. He told me that he would be taking part in the next round personally. What I thought he meant and what actually happened, though, were two completely different things. Behind the stage was even worse than out there. People in cages, chained up against the walls by their necks. Some of them were sitting in pools of blood, vomit, or what looked and smelled like they were on piss. They were wearing rags. They looked incredibly malnourished, and they had marks all over their bodies. Bruises, what looked like marks that would be made by cat o' nine tails, and gouges in the skin. There were guards watching over all of the people, and there was a lineup of people knelt down. I walked along the lineup with my employer until he got to his man. He was a lot buffer than the rest of them. He was still clearly wasting away, but he looked like he still had a fair bit of muscle and looked quite strong. I remember smelling this foul odor. He had hair growing down to his neck and had this overgrown scraggly beard which had chunks of some kind of food in it. My employer stopped and just pointed to him and said, "That one, get him ready." He told me to help the guards to prepare him. I kind of just stood there watching as they got the man ready with rope and as he struggled and fought back. He was clearly quite strong, and even tied up, he was giving them quite a bit of trouble. My employer snapped at me, told me to grab him from behind and to help them. I did as I was told. I grabbed him by his arms and pulled them way behind. He told me no, get him by the neck, and so I did. I had my arm wrapped around his neck and my employer told me, tighter, so I did so. I swear that I heard something click when I applied more pressure. I could feel myself shaking, and at one point, I just feel this sharp pain. The fucker just bit me, but if I let go, I would be in trouble. I tried to stifle a shout, but my employer clearly saw that I was in pain, and he just started beating the man, just in the stomach. He got a bat or something, and struck him in the stomach mostly. He told me to be careful, not to sully him before the main event. Eventually, the restrained man just gave in and just walked along normally. I helped walk the man out into the cage, and we untied him and then threw him inside. The announcer gave another spiel. It wasn't really important. I wasn't even really listening anymore. I do remember though that the announcer told everyone that the next round would be extra special, and he got people excited for what was to come. I was told to just stand outside the cage as my employer got ready. I was told that I would be assisting with this round and that I should just do whatever I was told. One of the guards on the other side, they asked my employer what kind of advantage he wanted. It did not take me long to understand what that meant. I was tossed a blindfold, and I was sent in with another guard in order to blindfold the strong guy in there. He tried to put up a fight, but even when he managed to hit me, I could tell he just didn't have the energy anymore. We blindfolded him and left him, being careful not to do any more damage. My employer, he then asked for a strange kind of weapon. He asked for a whip, a cat o' nine tails. And with that, he entered the cage, and the announcer started his long spiel again, explaining things to everyone. My heart was just pounding standing there. Nothing felt like real life anymore. It seemed like time had just started to slow down, and I could feel everything. I could feel everything all around me. I don't know, it's hard to explain. I was just scared about what I was going to witness. I don't want to go into too much detail, and if I'm honest, my memory becomes pretty spotty from this point onwards anyway. I guess from the stress and anxiety, tenfold from being involved. It went on for far, far too long. My employer would make a sound and taunt the man, who would run blindfolded at him, only to be met with the edge of the cage, or the barbed wire, or a fist. And once his back was turned, my employer would strike him. It seemed like he'd used that whip many times before. Nearly every single strike from it drew blood. The sound it made was sickening. It was like a crack of thunder in the air, and it was so loud and so quick. After a while, the man was exhausted. He could barely even stand. Even doing so much as a jog was out of the question for this man. But the people in the audience, they loved it. They were laughing, throwing food and other things down at the stage. They were like animals. And my employer, I had never seen him so happy before in his life. He was always so serious and business-oriented. I had never seen him so much as crack up at a joke. But here, he was grinning so wide and just enjoying each and every single moment. Eventually, someone came down and tapped me on the shoulder. I was given some kind of a cattle prod, the kind that you can shock someone with. I was instructed to jam it into the cage, into the back of the man. I was told to do it once to make him move. If he still refused to move, I was to do it once more and then stop, because any more might knock him out. I did as I was told. It only took one shock. The man felt it, turned to look at me, even though he was blindfolded. He obviously could not see through the cloth, at least, I don't think so. The blindfold looked wet around the eyes, flecks of blood were on it too. And after trying to look at where the shock came from, he just made his best effort to run. It seemed like he had maybe done this before. He ended up hitting the deck and was just wheezing heavily on the floor. My employer whipped him a couple of times and then told me it was no fun. He pointed at me. He told me it was my turn. I entered the cage because he forced me to, and he handed me the whip. He told me to try as hard as I could. I tried to stutter out something like, I've never done it before, and he grabbed me by the collar with 2 hands and said to me, "Did I ask you to fucking speak?" And so I whipped the man. His back was just a bloody mess at this point. He told me to do it again, but harder this time, for real, to not hold back, and I did. The blood was pooling up on the floor, and I was told to do it again, and again, and again. I remember at one point, my vision was so blurry, and I could barely see. The man in front of me had just become some kind of a vague shape in my vision. I felt like I was going to pass out. After a little while of that and him laughing, he told me to leave, and I did so. After that, he got different weapons, heavier weapons. Even when the man was almost certainly dead, he just kept going, until his head was just bits on the floor. I tried my best to disassociate. After he was done, he came out and put his hand on my shoulder. He told me that I had done a good job. He told me that if I could keep it up, then I would go far, whatever that means. Then he pointed at the cage, at the vague shape of a man on the floor, and he told me to help clean up. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. I was given a bucket, and I had to scoop up the pieces with my hands. They didn't even give me any gloves. Mopping up the floor was almost impossible, even with help. It seemed like the stains just sunk in deeper and deeper. After the cleanup was done, I had to go and stand beside my employer for the rest of the night. It only seemed to get worse from there, but I think I've said more than enough. I don't even want to think about it anymore. I could not even go and wash my hands. I had to feel the mushy human remnants on my hands the whole night, and every time I moved them, I could smell it. I could smell it everywhere. It just lingered in the air. I guess any sane person would have cut and run after that night. But me, I guess I'm just too much of a coward. I saw what was going on that night, and it made me fearful. I had no idea about the existence of something so horrible. I didn't know whether this was the tip of the iceberg or the darkest depths. I thought maybe that if I tried to quit or leave, I might end up as one of those people forced to kill someone else or put on a show as entertainment. And I didn't want that. How do I live with myself? I don't. I spend most of my free time drunk or high on whatever drugs I can find, stuffing myself with food and just whatever else I can do to distract myself. After that day, the floodgates opened. I've seen more horrible things that I don't even dare to think about in my own head, let alone type up here. I don't know what to do. I don't think there's anything that I can do. I think that even if I ran away somewhere, I think they would find me and punish me. This is a story from back in my expedition days. It happened to me about 3 years ago. I was up in my cabin in the woods in northern PA with 2 of my friends. We decided to go for an all-out 4-day hike. We have food, water, guns, booze, smokes, everything that you need, really. Only the important stuff, though. We all decided to hike north, since we know the areas to the west pretty well, and we've never gone far north before, so we kind of just want to explore somewhere new. The first day of the hike, we come across a few deer and a bobcat. Otherwise, nothing really all that interesting. We bed down for the night and wake up early. We pack up our tent and continue on our trek. The second day is a lot quieter and much colder. At around 9 a.m., it seemed to get a lot colder. It had been slightly foggy all morning, but at around 9, it really started to get unnaturally thick. Feeling our way around and navigating by compass, I start to get the feeling like we are being followed at a distance, despite the pea soup fog all around us. One by one, my friends start to become visibly tense. About an hour and a half into this, while I'm on point navigating, I signal with my hand for everyone to stop walking. We hear something behind us, a good distance, crunching leaves, and then stopping abruptly. We all turn our guns in the direction of the sound, and my friend Dave shouts out, "If anyone is following us, knock it off. We have guns." We stop moving for about 5 minutes, listening intently for any kind of sounds around us at all, but we don't hear any. We resume hiking north, still knowing that we are being followed. The fog is still everywhere. Visibility is probably no more than 15 yards in any direction. We hike for another few hours, stopping every so often to listen for whatever was following us. And a few times, it seemed like we had lost whatever it was, man, animal, or other. Visibility throughout the day fluctuated generally from 15 yards to about 30. At around 3 in the afternoon, the severely dense woods give way to a rather large clearing. I'd estimate a full acre or so. After stumbling around the clearing for about an hour or so, the fog starts to burn off, visibility increasing quite a bit. I noticed that the clearing appears to be almost perfectly oval in shape, and in the middle, there were 6 sharpened sticks arranged in a hexagon about 4 feet apart from each other, all facing outward from the middle. I realized that we were about 2 days hiking distance from any civilization. Okay, this is pretty weird. Anyway, we decided to set up camp and get a good fire going. We put up our large tent and gather some wood, including those weird sticks that we found, and we get a roaring fire going. We eat all our food, and we start getting ready for the night. We notice that we have not heard any animal sounds all night, not so much as a bird chirping in the last few hours. We then become aware of this weird, high-pitched sound, like a cricket's chirp, but constant and a lot quieter, and it's coming from the woods. Well, we already have camp set up, so there's no point in trying to move on now. I'm still a little bit freaked out. We set up watch, with my friend Mike getting first watch. Dave and I head to bed at around 10, leaving Mike on watch with an SKS and 2 stripper clips. Fast forward to around 11:19 p.m. I am awakened to the sound of a single shot. I stumble out of the tent to see a visibly disturbed Mike clutching the gun for dear life with the bayonet unfolded. I ask him what happened, and he tells us that he saw a huge silhouette moving back and forth at the edge of the clearing. Now we are all wide awake, with loaded guns, and really scared. We all sit outside the tent on different sides, using shitty flashlights to try and illuminate whatever is out there. For about 3 hours, we do not spot anything, and sort of just attribute it to nerves, until about 2:30 in the morning, when we hear what sounds like disembodied conversations happening at varying distances away from us. It's loud enough to know that it's talking, but not loud enough to determine what is being said. About 4 a.m., the fog rolls back in, and all of the voices just stop. It's now deathly silent. Saying anything just sounds really, really loud. No. Luckily, the fog burns off at around 8:30 this time, and as it does, we see a huge scar in the dirt on one edge of the clearing, where all of the sod was ripped up that was not there the day before. We grab all of our stuff, undo the tent as fast as is humanly possible, and nope the hell into the woods on the opposite side. We walk as fast as possible without actually running, first to the west and then to the south. We covered about twice the distance that we did the day before, and linked up with a trail that I was familiar with before heading back to the cabin and passing the hell out. I still don't know what the hell happened back there. Personally, I believe that we were being hunted by a black bear or something, but that clearing was really incredibly weird. Like, The place is a full 2-day hike away from the nearest civilization, and the woods are way too dense for people on quads to get anywhere near it. They would have gotten stuck on the trees or the branches or some of the brush. There is no way they could have made it all the way out here, and especially, we would have heard it. Finding it was like finding a needle in a haystack, yet someone was obviously there before. The only way you would ever find this place is if you were looking for it. You wouldn't just stumble upon it accidentally like that. Anyway, I am never hiking north. Ever again.